All right, we're going to be discussing two controversial subject matters today with the great Dr. Ryan Burge. Homeschooling, which is in and of itself controversial. It shouldn't be, but it is. And political and religious views of children. And we're going to take those two, and we're going to mesh them together. But
Should be fun.
We've got the data.
Yes.
We've got the facts. And before we get into it, want to thank our sponsor, Upward. They have an incredible new program, Upward Running. I love to run. I know many of you love to run. And if you've ever thought about, you know what, it would be great to connect with my church and my community through physical activity. Let's get people exercising. This is a really good way to do it. And it can be something as simple as a 5K challenge. They have this 5K challenge program. They've got a run club app. All of this is very simple to start. And even if you're like, okay, can we do this? Upward will walk you through it. That's the beauty of Upward, is they help you through all of this. In fact, they've got a run coach for you. So the way that you can find out more is upward.org/run coach. Reach out to them. They will give you all the details. This is one of the best ways to connect to your community. It's through sports, because there's so many people in the community that love sports. And honestly, we could all use a little more physical activity. So Upward solves a lot of problems in your church, and they can help you reach out to your community. Upward.org/run coach is the place to go. All right, Ryan. We all know the stereotypes of homeschool children. We're not going to go there. That's not the point. We have plenty of homeschool families in our church. So just for those of you who are listening, I'm speaking as a supporter, not as someone who wants to denigrate or continue the stereotype, because there's a lot of studies out there that show that the worst of the stereotypes really aren't true. But I want to look at the data, and I want to look at some research that you did on homeschooling and political and religious views. I listen, this was an article of yours. I found it absolutely fascinating. So, walk us through kind of high level, and then we'll dig in.
This is a cool data set, by the way. It's hard to get data on homeschool kids just because it's a weird sample of people of not weird in the cultural way, Sam. Weird in the
I know, but you're right, because the sampling of this is extraordinary. Doing research on children is very hard, and then the very nuanced idea of homeschool kids even harder. So I commend you for doing this.
Well, I didn't do it. There's a group called FIRE, which is like a free speech group, which makes everyone mad, by the way. Everyone thinks they're like a conservative group. They're actually not. They actually just defend free speech on college campuses, even the speech they hate, which is the kind of speech you should probably defend on campuses, because that's what free speech is for. And they do this annual survey, and it's big. It's like 60,000 college students at a bunch of different universities, like over 300 universities. They really try to get like a nice sampling of like not just like Harvard, University of Michigan, Ohio State, but also like smaller schools. Like they had SIU Edwardsville in their survey because I looked it up.
What is SIU? Only you would know that.
Southern Illinois University, which is, I went to SIU Carbondale for my PhD. So, and I teach at Eastern Illinois University now. So I was like looking for a local school. And what's cool about that is they asked them what kind of school they went to for, like high school, grade school and high school. And, you can find, there's over 1,000 homeschool kids in this sample of like 60,000 people, which obviously, like, is this a random sample? No, but good luck getting a random sample that has enough homeschool kids in it to do anything with. So I think like this is definitely in the category of like pretty good, like good enough to even like, make some conclusions about and think about academically. And what I like about it too was they actually broke what kind of school you went into more than like two categories. It wasn't just like homeschool or public school. It was public school, public charter school, public magnet school, parochial school, private school, and homeschool. So like you get like the whole like different flavor of not just like Catholic school kids. And actually that we'll get to that in a minute, but I think that's actually the most interesting comparison is like parochial school kids are really the closest cousins to homeschool kids. And I know we don't want to dig into the stereotypes too much, but I think we all understand that the homeschool movement is driven at least in part by religion. At least when I was growing up, I'm almost positive every homeschool kid I knew was came from a religious household, a very religious household. I think that's changed a little bit in the last, 15, 20, 25 years, especially after COVID. But I think at the time it was definitely a religion thing. And so I just wanted to figure that out. Like, are homeschool kids more religious than other kids? Kids went to public school, kids went to private school. So that's really the point of the post.
Yeah. And I would say you're right, at least from my anecdotal evidence that I've seen is, at least historically, a lot of the homeschool movement was driven by religion. So I think it's a fair question. Are these kids coming out of this and actually being religious, living kind of the way they grew up? So it's a fascinating study, at least here in Florida. We have this whole system that's a little different than other states because you can actually get funding for just about anything you want to do. It's about $7,500 per kid. And it's available to really anyone. And so we've got micro schools and, these homeschool co-ops and any number of things, because a lot of families are taking advantage of this. I'm a huge fan. I know it's not universally well received, but for those of us who are parents who have a lot of flexibility, we love it, because it enables me and my wife to send our kids to private school. We couldn't do it otherwise. Yeah. So I think it's a good and valid question, particularly as states adopt some different forms of how they're funding education. You're only going to see more of this, not less. So this is a trend that is moving in a direction of growth. So walk us through some of the results.
I know you're going to be shocked by this, but a lot of kids at Hillsdale, I don't know if your audience knows what Hillsdale College is. It's like basically well known as probably the most conservative college in America today. A huge chunk of their student body is homeschooled. Which Patrick Henry College is like that too, by the way, in Virginia. So like homeschool kids do gravitate to certain types of institutions. They're not going by and large to like University of Illinois or Mizzou or Alabama or places like that. They're going to Christian schools because, again, they're Christian. And guess what the data says, Sam? The kids who are the most likely to attend church every week are kids who are homeschooled. 34% of homeschool kids. Now, this is when they're in college, so they've even like left the nest, right, and gone on to a new place. 34% of them are attending every week, and another 12% are attending monthly. So like almost half of them are attending once a month when they go. And by the way, these are homeschool kids who went away to a college. So this is not like homeschool kids who just like at 18, like worked on the homestead or got a job or whatever. These are kids who went to homeschool and then went to college. So even it's a subset of a subset. That attendance rate is actually double the attendance rate of public school kids. Only 16% of public school kids went to church every week, and it's 34% of homeschool kids. So there's definitely some stickiness, right? These homeschool kids are raised religious, and then they go into college, and a huge number of them are still very religious. Only 26% of them say they never go, homeschool kids. It's almost 40% of public school kids. So big differences there.
So as a pastor and as somebody who would call himself a conservative evangelical, this warms my soul, right? This is like, this is great, so, but correlation is not causation. So it's tough to say that the homeschool environment causes the desire to be in church more. But there is a relationship there. There is a correlation there in which, at least families that are homeschool families are more involved in churches. I've seen that in my own church. I think a lot of us who pastor churches who have like a group of homeschoolers there, I think if you sit down and just looked at the data in your own church, you'd probably see that they are the ones who are there more often than not.
And you also we all got to admit the kind of kids who are in homeschool are not a random. We didn't just grab 5 out of 100 random 7-year-olds and throw them in a homeschool.
You should not grab 7-year-olds, but yes.
No, you shouldn't. But what I'm saying is it's a self-selected population, which makes all this analysis really problematic from a social science standpoint, right? From like trying to like figure out causation and stuff, because, people are like, oh, well, homeschool kids score higher on the ACT than public school kids. So homeschool has to be a superior form of education. You can't make that claim with that data, by the way. It just does not work because homeschool kids tend to come from a different socioeconomic background than public school kids. And that's just a fact. And, 2-parent households. Let's compare 2-parent households in the public school versus 2-parent households in the homeschool and see how big the differences are. Because I guarantee you they're a lot smaller once you start controlling for things like education, income, and stable households. So that's what makes all this really hard is like, this is what this is the part of like the Christian discourse that really, as a social scientist, makes me the most angry, is when people will present statistics like that without giving any context to an audience who doesn't think about causation and correlation very much. It goes, yes, homeschooling must be superior. And I'm not saying it's not, by the way. What I'm saying is you can't use that data to say that it is, because there's a selection issue going on here. I was in a Catholic school once and said, like, our students are twice as likely to go to college as public school students. Like, the fact your parents can pay for you to go to Catholic school means they're probably going to be able to pay for you to go to a university. Like, that's the thing that's what's doing the work here. But when it comes to religion, I think we all know that the religion in which you're raised in has a huge impact on what religion looks like for you when you're 22 or 25 or 30 years old. And if you want your kids to be religious, evangelicals are actually the best at retaining people, like young people in their church. About 75% of people who raised evangelical are still evangelical. And I think that's what you're seeing in this data, right? Is like those ties are sticky and they really kind of enmesh themselves in people. And even when you leave, you're still evangelical. You can't get away from it.
So many of these students are Protestant.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. I think what you said in your data is twice as likely to be Protestant.
That's right. 45% of homeschool kids are Protestant, which is double in the public schools, 28%. And only 26%, but actually I thought this was higher than what I would have guessed. 26% of kids who are homeschooled say they're atheist, agnostic, or claim no religion in particular. So a quarter of homeschool kids are nuns. Wouldn't have guessed that. That's actually, it is, by the way, it is significantly lower than the kids who went to public school, because 45% of kids who went to public school are non-religious. It's like a 20-point difference there. But you know what's striking is the parochial school comparison to the homeschool comparison actually shows you there's not a whole lot of difference in religious behavior, religious belonging between kids who are like, when parochial almost always means Catholic school, by the way. Not always, but I would say like 80 or 90% of these kids went to a Catholic high school, and their religion looks almost exactly the same as the homeschool kids. It's just they're more Catholics. The Christian shares about the same. It's just the Catholic Protestant mix is switched in the parochial school versus the homeschool thing.
So let's talk politics. Now we've kind of got some foundation laid with the data.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, the average homeschooled child grows up to be independent regarding political partisanship. And they tend to be more middle of the road on political ideology. Do I have that right?
Very few of them say they're very liberal, though. It's 12%. 10% say they're somewhat liberal, and then 9% say they're slightly liberal. Add that together, you get what? 30% of homeschool kids say they're liberal. 20% say they're conservative, and 20% say they're middle of the road, and then the rest, about half, say they're conservative, which is, by the way, not that much different than the parochial school kids. It's actually almost exactly the same as the parochial school kids, but it is significantly different than the public school kids. I think that, to me, it's almost like the homeschool kids and the parochial school kids are like cousins or very closely related, and the public school kids are like in a completely different world. And to make it even more granular, the kids who went to a public magnet school, for those of you who don't know, magnet schools are big in big urban areas. It's where you don't have to go to the school in your neighborhood. You can pick, like, I'm into the arts, or I'm into vocational skills, and they'll send you to a different school based on what what you want to do. It almost always means you're urban. Guess what group's the most liberal of all these kids? It's the kids who went to magnet schools. So kids who grew up in a liberal, an urban environment tend to be more liberal. They go to public school, tend to be more liberal. So that's the most liberal group. Again, how you're raised has a huge impact on your politics and your religious behavior in your 20s. I mean, very few people radically shift themselves from like 16 years old to 22 years old. You kind of stick with what you know, and for a lot of these people, they know liberalism, or they know going to church, and that's exactly what they do when they go to college.
So I did find that part of the study a bit fascinating. I would have thought that there would have been a stronger leaning conservative with homeschool, but you're saying that 31. If I'm looking at my notes here, but 31% of Christian homeschoolers said they were, after they got out of the homeschool system, were liberal. So roughly a third, maybe a little less than a third, go through a Christian homeschool system and then afterwards say they're liberal. Now, Why is that? What am I missing? I mean, maybe that's just the conservative in me saying like, who are these people and where are they coming from?
But who are you, right?
So I have political leanings, I have ideological leanings, I have religious leanings, and I'm not ashamed of those. But at the same time, data is data, facts are facts, and that's what I love about what you do. Is I just want to know the facts, and then I can deal with what's in front of me. So why is it a third of Christian homeschoolers end up being liberal? What has happened there? Do you even know?
I mean, there are Mennonite folks out there. You know what I mean? Like, you can like homeschool your kids and be a liberal. Like, you know, like it's not. I think part of it is the same. You live in Florida. I live in Illinois. Like the kind of like homeschoolers we have here are not the kind of homeschoolers you would have in like Portland,
well,
right?
That's true.
Or
that's
like Seattle, or even New England. You know, there's a strain of like liberal, old school, like Shaker style, like old school Protestantism up in those areas. There's some liberal Catholics out there that might homeschool their kids for whatever reason I don't fully understand. And you know what? Here's something I thought about too when I was writing the post is I don't know how many missionary kids we've got in this sample. You know, because I think that missionary, and like I know a lot of MKs because I went to a Christian college, and a lot of kids there were MKs because they got a huge tuition discount because they were MKs in their denomination, which makes sense. And PKs too, by the way. Missionary kids tended to be more liberal than pastors' kids, is what I found. And I think that it's that global perspective that they got while they were in the mission field with their family, and they saw things from a non-American way. And, you know, let's be clear, the American political parties are pretty far to the right in the grand scheme. Even the Democratic Party in America is actually to the right of center in the grand scheme of things. So if you grew up in, you know, sub-Saharan Africa or Southeast Asia or Europe as a missionary kid, you're a homeschool probably because of that, but you're also liberal, you know, or liberal in the American sense, I guess I would say. And I think that's probably part of it too, is we don't pick up on those things very much. I'd love to do a survey of missionary kids. Like that'd be a fun little, it'd have to be a convenient sample, obviously, where you have to like go, you know, like find networks of missionary kids in America and just ask them, you know, like, and do one of pastors' kids too, in like similar denominations to see the differences, because even those experiences like that can have a huge impact. And here's something else I think about too, is how many kids are just straight up rebelling for what they grew up with. You know, they just had this like very allergic, visceral, and you got to think too, these are homeschool kids who a lot of them went to public colleges and universities for their 4-year degree, which means they're trying to go and move far away from the environment in which they grew up, right? Like I think we all know you can raise 5 kids in a homeschool environment, and 3 would like stay. They would want to raise their kids the same way. They'd want to get married young. They want to have, you know, all those things. But you might have 1 or 2 is like, no, I want to move to California. I'm going to get tattoos. I'm never going to go to church ever again. So it's not perfectly predictive, right, of how people end up as adults. And some people react to it very violently and very quickly too, you know, in their 20s.
You know, most people don't know this about you, Ryan, but I'll just share one of your secrets.
Oh, boy.
You know, you have this gigantic tattoo on your back of your favorite multinomial regression. And I don't know that people know that about you, but it's a wonderful tattoo. It's beautifully done and statistically valid.
Thank you. That's really what I hope for. The math don't math. And I when I was in college, everyone got tattoos, and you know what I said? I'll get one, but the problem is I'll hate whatever it is in 5 years, and so I just never got. Because like, you know how like things. Here's what makes me mad, Sam. Fonts. You know, fonts. Like,
here's what makes me mad. Fonts. There you go.
Because when I see a tattoo of words, because like there was a trend for like girls, like teenage girls and college girls to get like, you know, words on their ribs or their arms or whatever. The font they use is like really cool now, but in 10 years it's going to look very like passé. So that's why I can't do a tattoo, because I just think that what I think is cool now will not be cool in 20 years from now, and it'll just make me mad looking at it. So, you know,
just get a tattoo in Comic Sans.
If you want to make everybody mad. That's the one thing I know. Like whenever someone gives me a flyer and it's in Comic Sans, I'm like, I can't take you seriously right now.
Unless they're doing it ironically.
No, and these people are not. Like, it's like kids' school. It's like 55-year-old women secretaries, you know? Like, and they think it looks good. And I'm like, oh, go pick another font. There's so many free ones in Microsoft now. You just hit the drop down. It's fancy. Like, just try something.
So let's put a bow on this.
Good.
We have wandered to and fro and have landed right back where we are. So as homeschool children become adults, and this is a part of the study that I thought was really important, they are more likely to be committed to the church. Mm-hmm. They are more likely to be slightly more conservative. but this is kind of my language, kind of my analysis, not particularly partisan in their politics. So committed to the church, more conservative, but maybe not as partisan as perhaps some others. Am I misreading the data? Are my conclusions off? Where would you correct me?
No, I think this shows a couple things, right? One is that like you can nudge your kids in the direction you want them to go. I think that's really, really important. It's not like just a random walk. They're like, well, just throw them up in the air and they're going to figure out where they land when they turn 21. Like, that's not true. If you want your kids to be religious, raise them in a religious way. And homeschooling, I think, is an added kind of thing on top of that. But, and this is the thing that this is not the iron law of like people ask me, like, how do I keep my kid in church? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, there are ways to like make it more likely or less likely, but there's no sure thing. Because, human beings have agency and we're all different. Our personalities are different and things like that. But I also will expand it too. It's not just homeschool kids. It's also parochial school kids too. Like both those they really stand apart from everyone else in the data in terms of their religiosity in early adulthood. So if you want your kids to be raised to stay religious in, their 20s, 30s, and 40s, I think the best way to do it is to raise them in the church, obviously, but then also send them to a Christian school, whether that be a homeschool or a parochial school. I think that will make them, and we actually saw this in the book, The Great Dechurching, that I wrote with Michael Graham and Jim Davis, where we asked people, like, were you part of a college ministry? Did you go to church on a regular basis when you were in college? And what we found is the kids who actually were involved in college ministry and went to a local church were significantly less likely to leave religion in their adult years. So I think that's the leakiest boat. Like if you look at the life cycle of like when faith falls apart for some people, it's between 16 and 25. And whatever you can do to sort of like reinforce the hull of the boat during that really rickety period with lots of rocks and wrong turns and things like that, you're much better off. And putting them in a parochial school or homeschooling them is a way to sort of patch the boat up and try to get through that period. Again, not that it's 100%, it's not going to be for everybody, but it's definitely a thing that points them in the direction you want them to go.
There you go. Heard it straight from Ryan Burge, the man with the regression tattoo. He knows the data and he shares the data and does not bash or dunk on evangelicals with the data. So
not on purpose, at least.
Not on purpose. Hey, we want to thank Tyndale, another sponsor of ours. They have been a long-term partner. Man, they put out so many good resources. I love the New Living Translation. Use it every week when I preach. It's my main Bible. But they have a really special gift for moms. So you need to go to BibleForMoms.com. You love your mom. You love the Bible. You need to get your mom a Bible for Mother's Day. So moms are amazing. My mom's amazing. Love you, Mom. They do so much for us. Now you should do something for your mom. Go get the Dayspring Daily Devotional Bible for Moms. It's got real life joys, real life challenges built in. These devotionals are great. Your mom will love them. Or maybe for your wife, so, if you're married and your wife and you got kids, go get this for her. BibleForMoms.com is where you can get the Dayspring Daily Devotional Bible for Moms. Well, thank you all for tuning into today's episode. Put some data out there on homeschooling and homeschool kids. And honestly, I think it's more positive than negative. Frankly, that's my take on it. Stereotypes. Well, let's get past the stereotypes. Let's look at the data. And there's a lot of positive things here for homeschooling your children. So if that's you, good job. Keep it up. Maybe your kids will stick in church. We'll see you on the next episode. Give us a thumbs up if you like the video on YouTube, a rate, review, and subscribe if you're listening in your podcasting app. We'll see you next time.